Greetings and salutations. Today we will be covering the mysterious disappearance and death of the Jamison family. On October 8th, 2009, Bobby Dale Jamison, his wife Sherilynn Jamison, along with their 6-year-old daughter Madyson, Stormy Star Jamison, disappeared without a trace. It must be noted that the family of 3 resided in the town of Eufaula, Oklahoma, and had traveled approximately some 30 miles to an area called Red Oak in the Sans Bois mountain range, with the intention of purchasing a 40-acre plot of land. They intended to live in a storage shed that they had already owned and located within the property. As it goes, upon arrival, Bobby and Sherilynn visited an associate of the landowner, and afterwards, the family went on a brief walk. It must be noted that they took their GPS with them and eventually found a quiet spot on a hillside. Then, upon returning to their vehicle, they supposedly drove a little further before leaving their truck locked in the middle of a dirt track and subsequently vanishing. The purpose for the family being in the area was to view the 40-acre plot of land, which does beg the question. If they planned to live in a storage container, what was the purpose of driving out into the middle of the woods? 4 years later, in November 2013, the remains of their family, along with their dog, would be discovered, and despite a thorough investigation, the police would be unable to conclusively determine what the cause of death was. The medical examiner would rule the cause of death as inconclusive, which caused the case to become one of America's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. It must be noted that this case continues to both intrigue and baffle investigators and the public alike. And while there is a litany of theories surrounding the case, there is a complete lack of conclusive evidence, which leaves many unanswered questions surrounding the case. To set the scene, the Sans Bois Mountains are located in Latimer County in southeastern Oklahoma, which is a small yet notable area of the larger Ouachita mountain range. This area is part of a frontal belt of the Ouachita Mountains proper. The Sans Bois Mountains do have a unique topography and a geology which make it a subject of interest to geologists and a litany of other researchers. It must be noted that recent events brought these mountains into the awareness of the common person, particularly the disappearance of the Jamison family. Now, details of the Jamison family go as follows. The patriarch, Bobby, had been suffering from chronic back pain after a car accident in 2003, and his wife, Sherilynn, had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. While not dangerous, this had caused the family to keep to themselves, which led to friends and other family members to report that the family's behavior in the past months leading to their disappearance was rather odd, due to how reclusive they had become. Reportedly, they had spoken with a local pastor about their beliefs that the home was haunted, and the matriarch had even believed that some witches had killed their cats. Bobby had asked the pastor for help obtaining special bullets to shoot spirits, which supposedly were living on the roof. This had gone as far as to cause the couple to purchase a copy of the Satanic Bible in order to perform their own exorcism. A friend of Sherilynn's also reported that Sherilynn, along with her friends, conducted seances together. However, Sherilynn, unlike her friends, took these significantly more seriously. These unusual behaviors, along with the family's disappearance, are the origin point for many questions and theories. Now, it must be noted that it was not just the Jamison family directly who had experienced these oddities while in their home. Nikki Shenold, Shelley's best friend, had described a feeling of palpable unease and desperation whenever she was visiting their home, going as far as stating, "But in all seriousness, that house was haunted. I don't want to sound crazy, but whenever I went there, I felt a horrible presence that would leave me feeling so down and depressed." In 2009, Sherilynn's ex-husband would gain custody of their son, and in September of that same year, Sherilynn would be hospitalized for a failed self-termination. During the custody hearing, the 12-year-old Colton testified that he would prefer to live with his father, and provided statements which noted his mother's rather strange behavior, claiming that she seemed very depressed and often acted strangely. These events brought additional light into the psychological position of distress that was experienced by the family members during the time leading up to their disappearance on the mountain. This is an avenue of investigation which is heavily favored by some. On October 16th, 2009, 8 days after the Jamison family was last seen alive, occurred the first major through in the case. A group of hunters would stumble upon the Jamisons' truck, which was in a remote section of the woods, roughly 1/4 of a mile away from the Jamisons' last known location. The truck was notably abandoned, however, it was still locked, and it still contained Bobby's wallet, along with Sherilynn's purse and jacket. The family had also left the GPS unit within the car. Surprisingly enough, investigators also found $32,000 in cash hidden within a bank bag beneath the driver's seat, along with the Jamisons' pet dog. It must be noted that Bobby's cell phone, which contained a recent photo of his daughter Madyson, was also found lying in the truck. However, there was no evidence of any struggle or foul play within the vehicle. The GPS unit, which was still within the vehicle, had provided very valuable clues, indicating that prior to the Jamisons leaving their truck, they had traveled further up the hill and arrived at a location which their truck would eventually be found. Upon following the GPS coordinates, investigators discovered footprints. One day later, on October 17th, over 300 people, including authorities and a series of volunteers, would form a large-scale search party who would comb the area for any signs of the missing family. However, despite their strenuous efforts, the search yielded absolutely no results and would eventually be called off, leading to the case's second major discovery. On November 16th, 2013, nearly a month after the search was called off, deer hunters would discover the skeletal remains in the Smokestack Hollow area of Panola Mountains, which were only 2.7 miles away from where the truck was located. Forensic testing would confirm 8 months later that these were the remains of Bobby, Sherilynn, and Madyson Jamison. When found, the remains had been drastically decomposed. The remains only consisted of 3 skulls, a series of bones, and bone fragments, along with the victim's shoes and some remnants of clothing. The remains had been there for 4 long years, since the Jamisons had vanished from their truck, and the remains were, fortunately, discovered due to the local hunters. However, interestingly enough, the initial search, which had supposedly combed through this area, failed to uncover these remains, despite the proximity to the Jamisons' abandoned truck and the fact that it was supposedly already searched. Special Agent of Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations would go on to attribute this to the dense foliage and leaves which potentially obscured the bodies, meaning that the state believed that it would be difficult to spot them. The discovery of the remains would finally put a rest to part of this mystery, meaning it was no longer one of the most mysterious and tragic missing persons cases in Oklahoma's recent history. While the bodies were decomposed to such an extreme state that it was worthy of note, someone spotted that one of the skulls, particularly Bobby's, had a small hole which was initially believed to be a bullet wound. This would be later discounted by police. However, the hunters who had originally found the bodies would disagree with the police's decision, leading to conflicting accounts. When questioned about why the initial searches had found nothing despite the range, size, and scope, a special agent of the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations would tell reporters that falling leaves potentially obscured the family's bodies. The subsequent search by officials would find bits of clothing, adult teeth, adult arm and leg bones, bone fragments, and bits of shoes. However, regardless of the evidence collected, authorities would state that there was no conclusive evidence of trauma. However, there would be later reports which stated that the deaths occurred under suspicious circumstances, but that disease and posthumous animal predation could not be ruled out. Additional details in the investigation would include a missing briefcase with a missing .22 caliber firearm, registered to Sherilynn Jamison, which was never found. It must be noted that regardless of having a laudable amount of cash hidden within their car, Bobby and Sherilynn were not employed at the time, but rather were on disability and receiving checks from the state. One notable yet eerie detail in this case was security footage taken from the outside of the Jamisons' home on the day they left. It showed the couple making silent trips between the car and their home as they packed in order to leave. Their movements were described by those who saw it, particularly investigator Bruchamp, as trance-like and robotic. Supposedly, they would sometimes stop and stare straight out into space. However, despite an intensive investigation, there would be no conclusive evidence as to what led to their disappearance or what caused their deaths. leaving much of this case still shrouded in mystery. Now onto the theories, which there are quite a few. However, we will be focusing only on 8 of them. The first theory is that the family may have died of hypothermia and exposure after getting lost in the woods. It must be noted that a heavy rain occurred in the area following their disappearance. However, it was not strong enough, or should not have been strong enough, to cause their deaths. The temperatures during the time were not even considered to be low. Add to the fact that their bodies were found only 2.7 miles from their truck. The second theory is that the Jamisons may have died in a murder, self-termination type scenario. This is due to a suspiciously long letter being found in the abandoned truck, which was written by Sherilynn to Bobby, accusing him of being a hermit. Another letter mentioning death was also found in their home. Sherilynn's mother believes that somebody else likely was the one to slay the family, and that Bobby and Sherilynn were actually good parents who would not consider self-termination. The third theory is that Bobby Jamison's 76-year-old father, Bob Dean Jamison, may have slain the family. Bobby had filed a protective order against his father 6 months prior to the family's disappearance, as his father had threatened to kill him along with his family on at least 2 separate occasions. Bobby had also alleged that his father was a rather dangerous man who had been involved with things such as prostitution, gangs, and the distribution or use of meth. It must be noted that Bobby was also in the process of suing his father at the time due to him not paying the promised half of the sales at his father's gas station, essentially having made his adult son work for free. However, Bobby and Sherilynn had been noted to previously have been quote-unquote scammers by a former sheriff, as they had sued 3 others after a car accident in a similar manner. Bob Dean's brother, Jack Jamison, had also claimed that his brother, Bob Dean, was disturbed at the time, but he would go on to state that he did not believe he would be capable of being involved in his family's own murder. The fourth theory goes on with the idea that in some way the couple's odd behavior was drug related. Some believe that the family was involved in a drug deal gone wrong, noting that the Jamisons' financial trouble did not match with the fact that they had $32,000 in cash hidden within their car when they disappeared. However, former Sheriff Vanderchamp would say that there was no evidence which supported this theory. The next theory was the involvement of a white supremacist individual or group. It was noted that a handyman and family friend named Kenneth Bellows was stated to have white supremacist leanings had stayed with the family prior to their disappearance. It also must be noted that Sherilynn had fired at his feet after an argument broke out over her Native American heritage. It is possible that Bellows in some way had the connection to a white supremacist group, which in turn would have targeted Sherilynn. Do bear in mind that the following theories are more fantastical than the previous ones. The next theory would be the involvement of a cult. Some people believe that the Jamisons were killed by a religious cult in southeastern Oklahoma. This is due to a statement by Sherilynn's mother, going so far as to state that a cult had a hit list which had Sherilynn's name on it. This is in part due to a woman who had claimed to have been a white supremacist, once telling her friend that there was a list of people who were classed as problematic within the religious group, which included both Sherilynn and Bobby Jamison. It's also notable that the family's sudden interest in witchcraft, along with the mysterious graffiti found on the storage container which they planned to live in, seems to give legs to this theory. The next theory revolves around the concept that the family was kidnapped by a group of individuals who would, in this day and age, classify themselves as minor attracted. Some speculated that the rationale behind the family's death was due to someone's desire to kidnap their daughter Madyson. Bobby's phone had a final picture of Madyson taken on the mountain that day, which seemingly was not taken by either of the friends, family, or the parents. And it must be noted that within the picture, Madyson seems to have a rather oddly uncomfortable appearance, which is noted to be rather unhappy. The final theory surrounding the case is that of witchcraft and possession. This is due to the Jamison family's pastor having stated that they were involved in supernatural warfare and supposedly had seen spirits in their home. Bobby had gone as far as to ask for the aforementioned special bullets to shoot spirits, and a witchcraft Bible, or the Satanic Bible, which one it is changes dependent on who is telling the story of the case, was found in their home after their disappearance. There was also a mysterious message written on the side of their storage container. However, what exactly the message states again varies from telling to telling. Although these theories all have some amount of plausibility to them, the disappearance of the Jamison family remains a mystery to this day. As we close on this chapter of the Jamison family's case, we are left with more questions than answers. The disappearance of Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilynn, along with their daughter Madyson, has been a mystery which has gripped segments of this nation for years. Once the family's remains were uncovered in a remote area of Oklahoma and were positively identified, the case was brought back into the mind's eye of many. However, even with the identification of the bodies, the cause of death and the circumstances surrounding the disappearance remain a puzzle. The question that people are left with is what led to the family vanishing into thin air? Was there foul play involved, or did they simply wander off into the wilderness and meet a terrible fate? What was the significance of the land that they were considering purchasing, and why was the storage container that they intended to live in marked in such a way? Did this land play a role into their disappearance? Despite years of investigation and heavy speculation, we may never know the true story behind the Jamison family's tragic fate. As the case remains unsolved, we can only hope that someday the truth will come to light and provide closure to their loved ones. Until then, the mystery of the Jamison family's disappearance and eventual death will continue to serve as a haunting reminder that sometimes even the most inexplicable tragedies remain shrouded in darkness. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.